let's get started so we can make the best use of our time here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is Abdel Khawatmi with PRMG. He's a mortgage lender, so I figured I'd bring him on really quickly, kind of talk about, what he thinks is going to happen, in 2022, so that we can all kind of prepare as best as we possibly can. So I guess the first thing is start off right at the back. I mean, interest rates are going up next year, most likely, right? So what's your take on that?
So the interest rates are obviously on the rise, as most of us have seen, and there's a lot of different factors. Over the last really year or two, we kind of got lucky with interest rates being so low, mainly because the Fed benchmark rate was close to zero, and people were able to take advantage of interest rates in the twos, mid twos, sometimes even like super low threes, even if you had a couple credit blemishes. One of the main reasons why we're seeing interest rates slowly start to tick up is the talk of inflation. The word has been thrown around nonstop, really over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen a huge rise. Just to name a couple of stats, it increased inflation from 8.6 to 9.6 year-over-year basis. So you're talking about the 1% hike. We're also seeing it predominantly not just in regards to interest rates or the cost to borrow money. You can get with everything. Gas prices, food, used cars almost up 30%. Gas utilities now is set to have jumped up almost 25%, and then electricity almost 6%. So inflation right now is at the highest in 39 years. And then another main thing was the Fed had announced that they were going to start tapering. And I don't know if you've heard about that, but what that basically means is that they're going to be buying less mortgage bonds and treasury yields. So basically what they were doing for almost the last 2 years was spending almost $120 billion a month and basically buying these mortgage bonds and treasury yield in an effort to keep interest rates low. What they've announced actually on November 3rd, where they were going to start spending less by $15 billion, right? And then last week they met again and they said, you know what, we're not going to wait until, so basically if they were spending $15 billion, if we did the math, they would about till June, July to reach the point where they no longer have to be tapering. They said they don't want to wait any longer, especially with inflation jumping up so high. Actually said they're going to speed it up by doubling the cost of tapering, meaning they're now going to be spending $30 billion less in an effort to obviously de-accelerate inflation. And then now we're not going to see interest rates out of nowhere tomorrow jump to 4 or 5%. Okay. They won't let that happen. What they're going to do first is once this tapering process has more or less ended, which if we did the math is essentially in 4 months and already started in December, basically by March, April, I think is when they're going to stop. And that's when we're going to see the first official rate hike.
Yeah. So where do you project that rate hike would fall? I mean, I know you're saying it's not going to jump up to 4 or 5% rapidly, but where? Because
looking at a lot of statistics from Freddie Mac and a lot of them, I think they're estimating it to jump up for the benchmark to be at around 3.4 to 3.8% for the benchmark. So what we've really seen over the last year or so was the benchmark was at around 2.75 to 3%. I think right now it's sitting at about, I would say 3.25, 3.125.
Yeah.
So it's going to jump up. Now, in 2017, when I was doing loans, we were offering mortgages at 5.5, interest rates, sometimes even as high as like 5.75. If we look at statistical numbers with Freddie Mac historical average, the history average of interest rates is just over 6%. So we're still well under history averages of interest rates. It's not going to be as low as what we've typically seen within the last 2 years. And it's not a bad thing because right now we have a shortages of homes. So there's short supply and obviously still a very high demand. maybe not as high as it was last year, but there's still a high demand and a lot more homes starting to pop on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of those variables we've learned from our mistakes, so to say, with what happened with the market crash.
Yeah.
And this is what will allow us the opportunity to truly be able to kind of centralize and stabilize the market a little bit with what's going on right now.
So let's say, you know, I'm a, you know, first time home buyer and I want to purchase my first home. I wasn't able to do it 2021. I wasn't able to take advantage of those rates. What do you suggest that I do to kind of prepare so that I can start shopping come spring of 2022, or maybe even before then, to kind of get the best rate possible in the beginning of the year? What would you say would be your approach if you were going to purchase for yourself come 2022?
So what I always tell people, because I just bought my second house in June of last year.
Yeah.
It's like right at the heart of when things were bananas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Took advantage of super low interest rates, obviously paid top dollar for the home, but the house appraised. And I think that's the main thing that people usually have that misconception. Well, I don't want to pay so much for the house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the bank is not going to lend you so much for the house regardless, right? So if you're getting an FHA loan, the max the bank will lend you is 96.5% because you have to put 3.5% down.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a conventional loan and you're putting 3% down, again, 97% is the max. Home prices appreciated almost 15%. Some sources say 15, some sources say 18%, which is crazy. Normally on 2012 to 2019, we were right at that cusp of anywhere from 8 to 9% of appreciation. So home values have always been on the rise. Just the last year, of course, with COVID and people staying in their houses and that fun stuff, low supply played a major factor. So if you're a consumer right now, the first thing, when you mentioned you tried to apply in 2021 and you didn't get qualified, the first step that you want to do, and not because I'm a mortgage lender, but I tell this to people all the time, and you and I know, is get pre-approved. Establish a budget, establish your financial standing, and understand what were essentially the hurdles that you encountered the first time around, or what do you predict the hurdles to encounter, whether it's in regards to, so I always tell people there's something called the 4 C's of mortgages.
Okay.
If you want to remember these 4 C's. What is your collateral, which is how much money are you looking to put down in regards to the down payment and closing costs? And then you have your credit. Credit is probably one of the most crucial things that affects the different program you can qualify for, right? So if you're teetering under a 680, 690, sometimes it's difficult for you to get a conventional loan unless you're a very large down payment. So you're restricted, right? You would have to go the FHA route as low as 620 or 580. Credit also impacts your interest rates. So kind of piggying back off of what we just spoke about a couple seconds ago in regards to interest rates. So just because the benchmark is at 3.5, 3.6, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily mean that you as a consumer will be receiving a 3.5 or a 3.6% interest rate. That's what the benchmark rate is. Usually the benchmark is based off of 740 plus credit score, 20% down, single family home. So I always tell people with interest rates, you want to look at 3 different factors. You have the home type, what you're buying, if it's a single family home, condo, if it's owner occupied, if it's not, and then what is the specific type of program you're receiving. The next is based on the client. So your credit score, your down payment. Is this your first home or your second home? And then the last is outside market factors outside of your control, which is what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Interest rates, treasury yield, mortgage bonds, and stuff like that.
So I do have a question, because this is something that I personally like the conventional program over the FHA program, just because of that the PMI falling off once you get 20% equity. If let's say we're going to say I want to go with a 5% down program as opposed to the conventional 3.5% program, do I get a better rate with that?
So I always tell people this, right? Government loan program for an FHA loan, interest rates are usually a little bit more competitive than a conventional loan. Statistically, right? When you get an FHA loan, interest rates are usually a little bit more competitive than a conventional loan, mainly because it's a government type of loan.
Okay.
Competitive on an FHA loan than it is on a conventional loan. Now, The main differences between the two with an FHA loan and a conventional loan is basically two things. Your mortgage insurance. FHA loan, unless you're putting 10% down on an FHA loan, it goes away at 10 years. But generally on an FHA loan, mortgage insurance is throughout the entire length of the loan. If you're putting 3.5% down.
Mm-hmm.
One of the benefits, though, of an FHA loan is that it allows you to qualify, as I said earlier, with a little bit less of a credit score. So you could be as low as a 620, sometimes even lower. And then it also allows you from what's called a debt-to-income perspective, how much you can borrow.
Yeah.
A loan allows you to borrow sometimes as high as 56.9%. Basically, if you make $10,000 a month, your total liabilities, including your mortgage payment and your revolving debt, can be as high as $5,600. On a conventional loan, it can only be as high as 45%, meaning $4,500 for that specific example of $10,000.
Yeah.
Now, with a conventional loan, it gives you the opportunity to either eliminate mortgage insurance entirely from the beginning if you put 10% down, or it gives you the ability to eventually eliminate mortgage insurance when you've built that equity in place and you've reached the 20% of equity. You have the opportunity to once again eliminate mortgage insurance. And mortgage insurance varies per consumer. It's not like a fixed number. They themselves also have contributing factors. How many people are on the loan? What's their credit score? What's their debt to income? Home that they're buying ranges. Some I've seen as low as $50. Some I've seen as high as $400. So yeah, and credit score and debt to income, from what I've seen, are one of the biggest factors of why sometimes I would push a consumer to go the FHA route as opposed to going the conventional route, because their mortgage insurance on a conventional loan is just super high.
So with the debt to income ratio question, topic you just brought up, the student loans forgiveness has got pushed back for I think till May, right? May. So if I'm, I suspect that I'm going to have a lot of student debt monthly payments. How does that factor into my DTI? Should I try to buy something before May 1st rolls around, or how should I position myself so that I can succeed, in 2022?
So great question. So the topic of student loans, right?
Yeah.
If you're acquiring, and this recently changed too, around September with FHA loans for student loans, but if you're acquiring an FHA loan and you are on a payment plan and you're actively making payments on that payment plan, we are allowed to use what that specific payment plan is as your debt to income. Normally before, we used to always have to take 1%. So for example, if you had $80,000 in student debt, we used to have to take 1% if it was being deferred or in forbearance, meaning $800 a month must go against your debt to income. They recently changed that to actually be dropped to 0.5%. So that $800 is now actually only $400. Okay. For an FHA loan. So you could either use the payment plan in place that you already have, which sometimes could be less than what that 0.5% is, or you do the 0.5%. Conventional, though, there's actually, without diving into it too much, but there's two different avenues. There's something called desktop underwriting through Fannie Mae, that you have to go 1%. So that same example we said, $800,000, 1% means that you have to be $800 a month against you. Or there's another platform also for a conventional loan called Freddie Mac through Loan Prospector LP that actually allows you to take 0.5%, $400, right? And then, or if you're on a payment plan, and this is where FHA kind of piggybacked because conventional was doing this, or if you're on a payment plan, then you can take that payment plan in place. So if you're right now and your payments are currently being deferred, but you necessarily think that your income may substantiate and get you a lesser payment, because there's different programs, right? There's income-driven repayment plans that you can do. There's fully amortized payment plans. We can use income-driven repayment plans. So that same consumer who, let's say, only makes $50,000 or $60,000, hit them with a $400 a month payment plan. And I don't know what the algorithm is of whether it's a Department of Education or Nelnet or Sally Mae or whoever it is the servicer is with, but they're not going to hit you with $400 a month and you only make, I don't know, $3,500 or $4,000 a month. They won't do that to you. They may hit you with $200 or $250. That extra $150, believe it or not, makes a very big difference in the long run, giving you the ability to qualify.
And this is probably why it's so important to get pre-approved, because then you can have these specific conversations about what your unique situation is. Because if you have this conception that, you know, I may not be approved because I have thousands and thousands of dollars of student loan debt, that may be a solution. You may be better off going conventional, saving up that 5%, or better off going that, you know, 3.5% program, depending. So it really just kind of harps home the reason why you will want to speak with the lender. Now I know a lot of times people don't want to speak with a lender when they're not ready is because they don't want to run their credit yet. What would you say to that? If I want to buy my house in June, should I run my credit now for a pre-approval?
So great question, right? So if you're when we run a credit report, right? There's always the question is, well, how long is your pre-approval good to? I don't really give a timeline on my pre-approvals. Once I've personally, once I've spoken with a client and I've shown you a lot of education, a lot of the follow-up and communication that I like to pride our team on, I would hope you're not going to go anywhere, right? We're going to keep continuing the communication. If a credit report is run, though, it is good for up to 120 days. It's good for up to 4 months. But 4 months, meaning you have to close by the 119th day, basically right at that 4-month cusp before it expires.
Okay.
If not, then the credit would need to be repulled for 4 months. So, Matt, you come into the situation too now, right, where the market is so competitive. I'm sure you as an agent, right, because you do very, very heavy both sides, right, buyer's agent, listing side. Let's put yourselves in the shoes of a buyer's agent. Do you necessarily want to show a buyer a home without an understanding of what they're pre-approved? Probably not. Maybe 1 or 2 homes. Listing agent, you likely would not want a buyer and their agent to come in and they're not pre-approved. Sometimes they won't even let you in the house, right?
Yeah.
But my understanding with a lot of my agents is they won't even let you in the house until you're pre-approved. Now, there's different conversations that we have with some consumers where if you are essentially a very strong buyer, right, 700 credit score, your debt is fairly low. I can tell you have a solid job, not that many liabilities based on our conversations. Then in some instances, I would provide you what's called a pre-qualification letter, and that would get your foot in the door. Now there's websites out there, like one called annualcreditreport.com, that every consumer the right to get a copy of their credit report for free once a year, and they do not have to get a hard inquiry on their credit. It's a soft inquiry. And it more or less gives them an idea. It doesn't give a score, but it would tell me the number of accounts that you have, what your utilization is, what the balance is. And what I do with a lot of our clients is I would add them manually, take that, add the potential mortgage payment of what they're looking at, divide it by their gross monthly income, and that gives me what their DTI is.
So you can base it on that credit report, which I think it allows you to do like one pull a year. So if I start the year and let's say like, you know, I'm getting ready, I'm starting to prepare, I can pull the credit report and say, hey, this is what I have. This is my income. This is my other debts and so on and so forth. And you can give me an idea of how much I qualify for, a rough estimate and ballpark interest rate or whatever, because that's going to change anyway. But that's really good. That's really interesting. Because a lot of times I would just say like, you know, hey, don't run the credit yet, but that gives you a good idea to really kind of hone in and gives you the best information to make the best decision so that you can kind of, if you're in that preparing stage of buying a home and not just ready to get pre-qualified. I like that. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind when I talk to some of my other clients that are in that specific situation. So I mean that kind of I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think prices are going to stay where they're at, or you think prices are going to drop or what?
I don't think prices are dropping. We're still dealing with a supply and demand, right? that's always been the concern over the last really couple of years, right? There's been, you know, statistical numbers looking at it, right? There's been 1.6 million homes that started in the U.S. in November, which is an increase of 8.3% from what it was last year. And then there was about 1.2 million completed, right, which is an increase of around 3%. Now, builders obviously, especially with inflation and supply chain that we're going through right now,
Yeah.
are not operating to their full capacity, but they're still operating. There's still homes going out there. You know, single family permits have also jumped up almost 2% when they were actually down almost 4% annually. Last month they just jumped up 2%. The cost of lumber is not as crazy as it was earlier, right? This year, last year, when I think, you know, talking to some contractors, some of our builders, it almost doubled or tripled. So prices for homes, I don't think will drop. I think we've, like I said earlier, we've learned from our mistakes of what we've done with the market crash.
Yeah.
You know, the Fed could easily fix this issue with inflation and just inflate interest rates and pick them up right away while they're tapering. That would cause a little bit of a market instability, right? So so what they're doing again is that they're going to taper, as I said earlier, slowly. They just said that they were going to do it faster, but they're still doing it slowly to the point where they've reached around March and April. And that's when we'll expect to see interest rates kind of take that little bit of a small spike. But again, affordability is still going to be there, right? You still have to qualify. Debt to income still going to be, you know, the major factor. Obviously, whoever didn't get a chance to buy this year or last year, it is what it is. But you get that question of, well, renting or buying, what's my better option, right? That's the question here all the time. And we do a very detailed statistical analysis where we'll actually cross compare how much you're renting right now and taking the levels of appreciation of where they're at and what your level of appreciation if you do buy a home, because when you buy a house, you're building equity from day one, right? Yeah. When you're renting, and that's the new thing too, rentals heading into next year is going to jump up also another 18 to 20%. So just because purchasing a home and the home appreciation has jumped up the same, rent is right there with you. And guess what? Depending on the clauses in your contract, and I'm not a licensed attorney, so you would ask an attorney, but a landlord, especially with what happened with COVID, are now in situations where they necessarily have no choice but to drop up their interest rates. Drop up their rental, right? Remember, as a homeowner, if you have a fixed mortgage, your payment doesn't change, right? Principal and interest. You borrow $100 and you're supposed to pay $120 with interest. It's always going to be you paying back $120, right? When it comes to rent, it can jump up 5%, 10%. I think I was reading an article where average rent is going to jump up for a consumer $300 year over year. Big difference, right? Think about that. That $300, if you're paying right now $1,800 or $2,100 in rent, I mean, you know better than me, but that's usually the average, right? For like a two-bedroom. That's a $275,000 mortgage if you're paying $2,200, $2,300. You know, where it's never going to change necessarily.
And you get to build equity, you know, like, because I was even thinking about it, like, even people that bought early 2020 or late all of 2019, 2018, really is not that far along, but they've built so much equity at this point, just by a matter of a couple of years. So that equity is the key to it all. But hey, man, that kind of wraps it up for me. I appreciate you taking the time. If anybody on here, if you want further information on, you know, real estate or how to get pre-approved, you can reach out to either of us, and we'll be able to help you guys out. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Not a problem, man. Have a great day. Happy holidays, guys.
Likewise, man.